Hi everyone, my name's Jessica from Paper Ink Stamp. Thank you for checking out my first YouTube video. There will be more, so please make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you don't miss out. If you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up or leave a comment below. So the card that we'll be making today looks a little something like this, and what we're going to be looking at is using regular stamps to create backgrounds. This is often something that I forget about doing, but it's such an easy and quick way of creating a background that matches a stamp set or embellishments that you want to use on your card. So we'll be using two Crafters Companion products today. So we'll be using this stamp set called Majestic Butterfly to create our background. It's actually a layering stamp set, so if you layer 3 of these images together, then you get a really detailed image that you can see here of a butterfly. But we're going to be using number 3 today for our background, as it's got the most amount of detail on it. The second product is this Special Day stamp and die set. So we'll just be die cutting using this metal die for our sentiment, but it comes with all of these stamps as well, so you can create a really fun sentiment for any of your cards. So I've already got my mats and layers and my card ready. So what we've got here is just a blank, normal shop bought 15 by 15 centimetre card blank. I've created a purple layer, so this is my first mat. So this is 14.5 by 14.5 centimetres, and I've got my regular cardstock, which I'll be using to create my background, which is 14 centimetres by 14 centimetres. So to get started, I'm going to be using my stamping platform to create my background. Okay, so I've just zoomed out so you can see my whole stamping platform. The one I have is the Tim Holtz by Tonic Studio platform. Now, I use this for all of my stamping because normally I like to stamp my images at least twice, so I know that I've got a real crisp, sharp stamp. So it has a clear gridded lid. So the benefit of it being gridded is if you're stamping sentiments or building your own sentiments, you can get them perfectly aligned and spaced if you're creating a sentence. The base of the platform is magnetic, so it comes with 2 magnets to hold your cardstock down. It also has 2 raised edges along here and along here. So this is so you can line up your cardstock perfectly and you can hold it down with your magnet. So as long as this is against one of these straight edges, if you're stamping and you're stamping twice, it means then that you can go back again and your cardstock wouldn't have moved. So your second stamp is going to be perfectly on top of your first stamp. So this is the stamp that we're going to be using to create our background. So again, this was stamp number 3 because it had the most amount of detail. So just bringing in our card that I showed you earlier. So the way we're going to stamp this is, obviously we've got our main full butterfly here. So this is the focal point of the card. And then we've just gone around to add in the rest of the butterflies to make the background. So what we're going to do is, because I want to leave the stamp for this one on my stamping platform so I can stamp it again after we've coloured it in, I'm going to do the stamps around the outside first. So the reason my stamping platform is so dirty is because when I stamp off my card, obviously the stamp is going to go onto the base. So what we're going to do is just grab a scrap piece of paper, so obviously this is where I've done it before, and we're just going to tuck this behind. So this is just to get the extra stamp that's going to be coming off the page, the extra ink, sorry, that's going to be coming off the page, and so it's not going to mark your stamping platform as much as mine has. So we know that we want to have a butterfly in the middle somewhere. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to grab one of the other stamps and I'm going to position that exactly where I want it to be. So these are sort of roughly the same size because obviously they stamp over each other. So that's where I want my main butterfly to sit. So I know that I want to have the right amount of spacing around. So what we'll do is we'll place that one just there. I'm going to move my magnets, so it doesn't matter if that one moves. So I'm going to move my magnets so that it'll hold my paper in place where I want it to be. I'm going to bring my lid over and I'm just going to press down, and that stickiness of the stamp is going to adhere to the clear side. So now I've got my stamping platform loaded and ready to go. The ink that we're going to be using, so I use the Finesse by Spectrum Noir, can't get that out. You can use any black ink pad that you want to, but I just find that this one is quite good. So what we're going to do, obviously we're not going to ink up our second stamp, that's just there for reference, but we're going to ink up this stamp. Now I do usually ink up the whole stamp, but obviously as you can see we're only going to be using part of the stamp to create our background. So I'm going to mainly concentrate my ink on this area, not necessarily up here. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to stamp, so I'm just going to dab it down. So again, just be careful not to get it on this stamp because we don't want any of that detail to get onto our cardstock. So just firm dabs down to cover the whole of the stamp. So bring our lid back over and we're just going to firmly press down to transfer the ink. Now I do carefully pull up the lid because sometimes if it is quite sticky, sometimes it will lift your paper, but again, because we've put it in the corner, that shouldn't be a problem, but we don't want it to generally move. So the reason that I stamp in my platform, and I like to stamp it twice, is obviously it's missed some areas here where I want a real nice crisp image. This is where you benefit from using a stamping platform. Of course, if you're very good at stamping, you might be able to get that on perfectly again for a second time, but I know I am sadly not one of those people. So again, we're just going to stamp it again, pressing firmly. So I've still got just a little bit missing just from that middle bit, so I'm just going to do it again. So I don't need to put the ink everywhere because I'm happy with the coverage that we've got up here. So I'm just going to re-ink the middle bit. So you can see that's a lot more of a crisp image. So what I do in between this is, because I'm going to be moving this stamp now to a different area, I don't want to perhaps accidentally drop it and get ink on my cardstock. So I do usually just wipe it off. This is just a microfiber cloth. Obviously you can see again, I do use it to wipe off quite a lot of stuff. You can just wash these. I've picked this up from a supermarket. So all I'm going to do is just rub off my excess ink. I'm going to pull my stamp off because I want to rearrange it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this stamp back off. So I'm going to reposition it where I had it, which was about there. So now I want to put a butterfly in this corner. So however I'm going to do it, I might do it facing that way. So what I need to do now is move my cardstock so I can fit that stamp in. So what I'm going to do is just move it all the way up. So again, still in line with this raised edge. And I'm just going to reposition my butterfly to where I want it to be. So I'm just having him flying off the edge. Like I said, I want this butterfly here to be my main focus point of the card, and the rest of it is just filling up the space. So again, we'll adhere that stamp. And we'll carefully pull it back up. So as you can see, it's just moved ever so slightly. So hopefully, and you can see we've still got some residue. So hopefully that'll line up again nicely. Okay, so we'll come back in with our ink, again being careful not to get it on our reference butterfly. So we're just going to dab it firmly on the stamp. Let's bring it back over. And carefully pull it back up. So you can see here obviously where it's taken the ink off it. Obviously I've got ink on the rest of it, but I know that's the main area that the ink is coming off. So we'll just reload that. Stamp it again. So I think that's actually good as it is. So I'm happy with that. So again, that only took 2. So let's just wipe off the excess ink again. So let's bring our reference butterfly back in. Just that. So now we're going to have to move it out again. So we're going to do one over here. So all I'm going to do is just pick up our magnets. As I'm going to move my scrap paper into the corner. So I'll bring my cardstock down in line with the bottom raised edge. So we'll just put that there just to hold it in place. So make sure we've got no excess ink. So this one will have, so we're pretty much probably going to follow that butterfly there for the bottom one. So if we do the top, just that. So once again, I'm going to come over and we'll adhere our stamp and carefully put it back up again. So you just check, so we've sort of got this top right hand wing. So again, so pressing down nice and firmly. So this is quite a big butterfly image. If you were using something smaller, you might want to sort of plan where you're going to stamp in advance possibly, so you can fit as much in as possible. But because this is quite large and I've got quite a small card, obviously we're not going to fit as much onto it. Okay, so that's butterfly number 3. So again, we just wipe off the excess. Now you could, instead of just wiping that off, obviously you could get another cardstock and you could create maybe a more faded background with the excess. So I could have a second piece of card like this. I could put it back in the same position and then I could stamp it for a more subtle butterfly background. But I am just going to wipe it off for the moment. So for the last time, let's line up our focus butterfly. So now, let me just move my magnets out the way. So this one might actually have to just float in the middle. Or I could move the cardstock around actually, but I'm just going to float it. So let's pop our magnets back in. So I usually like to pop my magnets as close to the stamping image as possible. So then that's with the stickiness of the stamp, that's where the card is going to be lifted from. So obviously you want to make sure that we're keeping that nice and secure. What you can do as well is I've just got some purple tape. So it's just normal low tack tape. If you really wanted to, you could just tape down the edge like that. So let's get this 4th butterfly on. So we're going to see quite a lot of this butterfly. So I'm going to stamp up most of it. So once again, nice firm taps of the ink pad. And sometimes if I want to get most of the ink transferred onto my card, sometimes I do stand up and use my palm to make sure then that I'm getting as much of it off as possible. So let's re-ink. So if I just stand up, just means that you'll get a crisper image, possibly in less stamps if you've got that extra bit of pressure. The underneath of this is foam, so it's non-slip as well, but it does just mean that it's going to hold. Even though my mat's going to move, my stamping platform won't. Okay, so let's get rid of our reference butterfly. We don't need that anymore, because now we're going to go in with our main butterfly. Now the reason that I've left this to last is because once we've put our colour onto it, I do want to re-stamp it again to get that crisp image, that crisp outline on it on top of the ink. So what I'm going to do, just take that bit of tape off, is I'm going to bring it back down into the corner. So this is again where I know I want to re-stamp this. I'm going to pop it into the corner of my stamping platform, so I know when I put my cardstock back in, that stamp is going to go directly back over my original stamped image. So let's just put my magnets down. So you want to be careful again not to drop this or not to move it about too much, especially if you've just had ink on it, because like you've seen, there'll be a little bit of ink residue. So I'm going to drop my butterfly there. I'm happy with that. Again, I'm going to move my magnets so it's holding the cardstock in place around my stamp. Adhere that to the lid and just gently pull off. So again, I've got a little bit of a shadow of where my butterfly is going to be. So again, we're just going to stamp up the whole of this image. We want a nice crisp image here because this is going to be our focal butterfly. So once again, I'm just going to stand up. So stamp it again. So what's good about this ink pad is it's relatively firm. It's got a lot of ink in it, but because it's nice and firm, it's not too squishy. If I use a squishier foam, if you like, it could then go into all the inside detail where we don't want the ink to go. So by this ink pad being a little firmer, it's just going to ink up the sections it needs to. So again, stamp that. So I'm extremely happy with how that's come out. So it's very natural, very organic in the way they're fluttering around, like you would get if you had a background of that design. Okay, so we'll just rub off this excess ink again. And I'm not going to move that butterfly stamp. I want that to stay there. So like I said, when we've put our ink on, it means then it's going to stamp exactly where I want it to. So let's take our background out of the stamping platform. So I'm just going to leave that in there with the paper. So if there is any ink residue left, it's only going to go onto the paper. And we'll move that out of the way so we can get on with the rest of the card. Okay, so here's our nearly finished background. So it's quite plain as it is at the moment, but you can really do whatever you want with this now. You can colour it, you can use your alcohol markers, your watercolour paints, you can water spritz onto it using liquid inks, really whatever it is that you want to do with it. You could leave it like that, put a big bold sentiment on the front, and that would make a really eye-catching and contemporary card. But if I just show you the previous card, we've turned this into the focal point of the card. Now there's a couple ways that you can make this stand out even more. So there is a coordinating die that you can buy to go with this Majestic Butterfly stamp set. You could cut that out of something like acetate and just stick it over the top, curl the wings on it, and almost like decoupage. You could just cut it out of regular cardstock and you can just stick it on top. You can make it a bit more 3D that way. But as I don't have the coordinating die, what I've done is I've just inked, I've made a mask and I've inked blended through the mask to colour it in. So the way I've done that is I've taken our stamp set, so I've taken this is layer number 1. So this is your base stamp, so it's a solid colour that you lay down first before you put all of your extra details on. So what I've done is I got a scrap piece of card, I've inked my stamp number 1 onto it. So like I said, because I don't have the die, I use my brother's scan and cut. So I've got a CM900 machine. I've scanned the image in, so I've stamped it in black, I've scanned the image in, and I've used my direct cut to cut the image out so it doesn't have a white border. It's exactly the shape that the stamp is, and now I have a cutout and I have a mask. So if I move this out of the way and just bring back our cardstock, so what I can do now is I can perfectly line up our image with the image that we've stamped onto our background, and what I'm going to do is ink blend through that. Okay, so to do this, what I'm going to do is I've got just a normal piece of printer paper. And what I want to do is, because my scrap paper, my mask, is smaller than my background, I obviously don't want to get any ink on any of the exposed edges. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to break this in half, and all we're going to do is put our scrap paper underneath our mask, but not so much where you can see it through and it's going to miss a section of our ink blending. So, and again on the top, and all I'm going to do is using, again, so this is just low tack tape, making sure that that's in the right position. I'm just going to tape it down. Because I don't want anything to ruin my nice background I've just made. Okay, so now we've got this all prepped, we're going to go in with our ink blending. So I'll be using 2 different colours. So this is the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide. We've got Seedless Preserves and Wilted Violet, and then we'll be ink blending them into each other on the butterfly to create a nice blended effect. So the tools that I use for my ink blending, so at the moment I'm using these brushes. Now this is actually just a cheap makeup brush that I picked up from a supermarket, just to see how they work, to see if I like using them. This is actually my third blending solution that I've bought. I started off with just regular makeup sponges, but they kind of fell apart and didn't sort of give me a good enough blend. I then moved on to these sort of wooden blocks with the replaceable pads, but again I didn't really get on too well with those, but these seem to be really good. I might even invest in a proper set, but like I said, for the moment I do just use a set that I picked up from a supermarket. So obviously they come in sort of different sizes, and then each of them I use the different colours for. So let's start with our ink blending. So again, I'm just going in, I'm just going to lay down my colour. So the bits you want to watch out for is like this middle bit, so you don't want to accidentally pull it back and get the colour underneath it, so just be very, very gentle with it. Okay, so now we've got the Wilted Violet, so we're just going to come into the bottom section, and again being careful of these sort of fragile bits because you don't want to get the ink underneath them. Again, just starting off lightly and then just get a little bit more colour on there. And I'm going to come up into this top bit of the wing as well, just to kind of blend that colour in a little more. So really you keep going until you're happy. So now if you can see, the actual black ink of the original stamped image is a little bit faded where we've put that colour, and because of the Distress Oxide sort of sits on top of it, it's just a little bit faded. That's why we're going to pop it back into the stamping platform so we can get that black crisp image. So apologies there, my camera cut out. So what you missed is I just finished off my ink blending. I spritzed my image with a little bit of water, just from a regular water spritzer, and I just dabbed off the sort of excess water, and because the water reacts with the Distress Oxide, obviously it sort of pulls the colour from it a little bit. And the only other thing I did was used a little bit of these watercolour paints. So I used the what says light pink but is silver, and I just flicked that onto it with a watercolour brush to give it a little speckled glittery effect. So what we're going to do now is take off our mask because we're all finished. And as you can see, we've got our lovely butterfly image there. And by using the mask, we've not gone completely outside of the lines, and it just means then that we've coloured in that one butterfly without having messed up the rest of the card. So what we're going to do now is look at the sentiments that we're going to pop onto the card. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to bring back in my sentiment pack that we've used. So again, this is the Special Day stamp and die set. So Crafter's Companion has brought out a few of these in their range. So I've got quite a few of them. So it comes with a single metal die. So this is the special. So this is special, and it's got a bunch of different stamps where you can create your own sentiments. So like I said earlier, I'm only going to be die cutting the word special, and that's what we're going to have go across the front of our card. So I've already pre-die cut them, so let me just grab them. So I've done two different layers. So we're going to have a bottom black layer, and then we're going to have a top shiny silver layer. So we're going to create almost a bit like a drop shadow. Now, in terms of adhering these to each other and then to the card, obviously you can use any glue adhesive, the roller tapes that obviously you're comfortable using. The normal glue that I use is this tacky PVA glue. Unfortunately though, it's not got a fine nib on it, so I find it a little bit more difficult to sort of not make a mess, if you like, when I'm gluing such a delicate thing together. So what I've used to adhere these is this product here. Now I'm sure you can get these in a couple of different brands, but this is the Stick It. So this is the sort of almost like adhesive sheets. I usually just cut it up and put it on the back before I die cut something. So that's exactly what I've done here. So you can see it on the black. Unfortunately it's missed a little bit, but I'm not too worried about that. So all I do is cut a section out, I pop it on the back of whatever I'm die cutting, put the die and my cardstock through my die cutting machine, and then once I've taken this out, it's already got the sticky adhesive on the back. So we just carefully remove this from the cardstock. So as you can see, it's got the adhesive ready to go on the back. All I'm going to do is poke out the little in-between sections that I don't want. So that's that one. Let's pull out our silver special. So this die cut really nicely from this. Let's put that to one side. Again, we're just going to pop out the extras that we don't need. And I'm just going to do it carefully because obviously I don't want to wreck my wording. So there we go, we've got our two sentiment layers. So you can see that's die cut really, really nicely using this silver card. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create, so I could just pop it straight on top, and as you look at it from the side, then it'll give you a nice raised sentiment, and you'll see the black underneath it. But I think I'm just going to pop it just off centre a little bit, just to give it a bit of a drop shadow. So all we're going to do, again using my pokey tool, is I'm going to pull up the back in. So each side of this adhesive sheet has got a protective covering. So when you take one side off when you are adhering it to your cardstock, then you take off the other side when you're ready to adhere it to wherever you're going to adhere it to. So if I can just get this off. See, it's quite fine, so I don't want to wreck my die cut. Let's just try a different little bit. See if I can do it with my nail. There we go. So you can see that just peels off really nicely. And again, just be gentle with it because you don't want to wreck your die cut. You don't want to get it out of shape. So all we're going to do is just create just a small drop shadow. Because then that'll help it stand out a little more on the card. So if you can see that there, so it's got just a nice little drop shadow. Let me put it on a piece of white card. You got that nice little shadow behind it. So, and then because we've got our adhesive already on the back of here, so if we bring our card back in, we can sort of start to think about the placement of where we want our sentiment to go. So again, on the previous card, I sort of had it down here. Okay, so this is the previous card. So as you can see, we've sort of put it near the bottom left-hand corner. So again, let's just have a quick look and placing it sort of somewhere around there. So I'm just going to make sure my card's lined up with one of the lines on my mat, because obviously I want to get my sentiment straight. So let's just bring it up slightly. So we'll put it sort of about there. And because we've had our paper adhesive, obviously it's on there as good as it's going to be if you use any sort of PVA, or if you use you know, the tape rolls, things like that. So I think it's well worth, when you're doing sort of intricate things like this, if you've got intricate dies, certainly using that that product, the sheets, the adhesive sheets, I think that is definitely well worth a look at. So now we've kind of basically finished our card. I'm not going to kind of do too much more to it. So let's get it popped onto our mats and layers and then onto our card. So again, talking about adhesive, people use tape rolls. Again, the sticky tape, they use all sorts of different mediums. I do tend to go towards the double-sided tape, just because I find it a little bit easier and again sort of less messy. The downside of using double-sided tape is you don't have any wiggle room. If you've pressed it down somewhere it's not where you want it to be, you do risk sort of tearing your cardstock, or you know, tearing your projects, and if you spent a long time sort of working on them, obviously that's not what you want. So we're just going to take off the back end of the double-sided tape. So I usually put it one on each side. Let me just get a picky tool because I'll be able to pull it up a little bit better. So you can get different sort of widths and things. The double-sided tape, you can go down the middle with it as well, but I'm happy just to pop it on the corners. So let's bring in my first mat. So we're just roughly line it up. I usually go sort of corner to corner. It's a tiny bit off, but that's fine. So again, I've already taped up the back of this one. So let's just pull the backing off this. Like getting your fingers stuck to it. So always check to see which way your card opens. You don't want to find out that you stuck it on backwards or upside down. And there you have it. So just make sure everything is flat down on your card. So I'm happy with that. So I am going to add one extra little embellishment. So I have the Dove Crafts. This is a 3D Pearl Effects. This is the clear one. If I just bring it a little bit closer, hopefully I'll focus on it. Bear with me. There you go. So you can get things like the Nuvo drops by Tonic Studios. I haven't used those yet, but I am planning to buy a couple just to see what they're like. But I have these in a couple of different colours. So I quite like the clear because it just adds something a little bit sort of special to it, but without it sort of taking over the rest of your card. So all we're going to do is I'm just going to shake up the bottle a little bit just to make sure it's all mixed in. And I'm just going to pop them sort of around the curve. So I'm going to pop them across the bottom of the L and then just up here above the S. So all we're going to do is just 3 dots. Like that. And try and sort of smooth down the points of them. And then again down here. Just adds just a little bit of embellishment without, like I said, taking over the rest of your card. It's gone a little bit skew with. So you need to let those dry, obviously, before you do anything else with the card, but they will dry hard on there. So that's it. So that's our finished card. So again, really easy technique. All it is just using a regular stamp and creating a background with it. Again, we've taken it a step further by creating the mask. But again, like we discussed, you can obviously embellish it and colour it in lots of different ways. Like I said, if you buy the coordinating die, then obviously you can create sort of 3D effects, like I said, decoupage, anything out of acetate. Obviously that'll look really, really nice. Again, we've got then just a real simple sentiment. So this could be a card for any occasion, really. Perhaps with Mother's Day coming up. Obviously, it's the butterfly, having that one butterfly coloured and sparkling in the middle. You know, you can kind of look into it like that. Obviously your mum is one of a kind, things like that. So thank you for joining me in my first video. Obviously we've had our little ups and downs, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. Like I said, if you want to leave a comment or a thumbs up below, that would be muchly appreciated. And if you want to subscribe, then you won't miss out on any of my other videos. So again, thanks very much and have a lovely evening.